Seventh grade Bobcats, welcome back to what I hope will be a great week for you at the Helena Middle School. Ready to get rocking and rolling on this Bob lesson. Gonna go part one of kind of a two-part series here. Today's Bob lesson is going to be called Perception. Next week is going to be called Blind Spots. This was kind of a combination I came up with a couple of years ago, and I think it's really important and really good information, interpersonal skills, interpersonal trying to figure out working with other people, looking at things from kind of a different perspective here today in how things are perceived, how you're perceived, how you perceive other people, so on and so forth. And then when we get into next week's blind spots and being aware, trying to gain awareness in things we do that we don't realize we're doing. So let's get rock and roll in this Bob lesson. As always, 7th grade, interpersonal friendships. Some of you in the dating world, interpersonal relationships are very important. So I'm hoping this is good education for some of you today. Let's make it a great week. All right, this week's Bob lesson is going to be called The Power of Perception. But first, let's be our best this week at Helena Middle School. Let's be safe, let's be responsible, let's be respectful. All right, to start this Bob lesson today, I want to ask you guys a few questions. How many, in this first one, how many boards or it looks like square, railroad tied looking things do you see? Notice if you're looking at from the left, you can clearly see that there are 4 railroad ties there. If you look at it from the right, it looks like there are 3. How about this one? An elephant here. Can you count how many legs this elephant has? Does this elephant have 4 legs or does this elephant have 8 legs? It's kind of an optical illusion, some of these. How about this one for some of you people that are more in the artistic realm? What color is this box? Is it blue? Is it gray? Is it navy? Is it a different color that maybe I haven't mentioned? And finally, we have a couple gentlemen here that are looking at this number, and one on the left is arguing that it's a 6, while the one on the right is arguing that it is a 9. Okay, so you may be asking yourself, what am I talking about with those 4 pictures that I just showed you? Well, I'm talking about something very important called perception, and I went to the dictionary here and got you guys a definition of what perception is. The first definition is the ability to see, hear, become aware of something using our senses. The normal limits to human perception is how it may sound used in a sentence. The second definition is the state of being or process of becoming aware of something through the senses, the perception of rain. And my favorite definition, which I think best sums it up, is a way of regarding, understanding, or interpreting something, a mental impression. Used in a sentence could be Hollywood's perception of the tastes of the American public. So what perception is it's using our senses to interpret something which ends up becoming our reality. And this is so important when we think about interacting with one another, when we think about taking information in and making our own decisions about what's what, who is who. And I'm going to talk about this a little bit more in the following slides as to why perception is so. One of the most powerful sayings is perception is reality. What do people mean when they say perception is reality? We live in a world where everyone is constantly using their senses to interpret and make their own reality using their perception. If you think about the guys in the beginning where one side is looking at a 6, one side is looking at a 9, they're never going to agree on what that number is based on their own perception or how many railroad ties are there. How people perceive a situation to be is going to become their reality. Well, where does this get us in trouble? This gets us in trouble because we're all unique, different, individual people. And when we come together and we have a disagreement on a situation, everybody has their own perception of the situation. And so many times we get in these arguments or we get in these interpersonal debates where we feel like we're beating our head against the wall trying to get the other person to see our perception or to see our point of view. And it's really tricky sometimes because each of us have our own perceptions, and those perceptions make our own reality. How they perceive you to be, how other people perceive you to be, is going to become their reality of how they view you. And that's super important to think about in terms of going through life and perception and how other people are viewing you and how that makes up their mind about. So knowing that we're all different, knowing that we all have different perceptions and those perceptions become our own individual realities, how can we use this information to grow as young people or to grow as human beings? The first thing we can do is we have to get to a point where we see life both through our own lens, that is our own perceptions about how things are, and the lens of others. When we can do this, this lends us to the understanding of other people. We should always try to see other people's point of views, where they're coming from, especially when we have disagreements, especially when friendships and relationships. In any sort of relationship, we have to have an awareness of how we see things through our perception and how we see things, how in many situations in life, other people's perceptions become their reality, even if their perception is different than yours. And where you guys may run into this a lot is with authority figures, maybe your parents, maybe your teachers. Your teachers perceive a situation being different than it is, and that's where coming back to my first bullet point is so very important. So when you have disagreements with authority figures, you need to understand that you may see the situation one way, authority figures see it another way, and sometimes that is unfair, but that becomes the reality. We also need to be aware of what we project or what we put out there, the energy, the body language, the affect that we put out there into the world. Because a lot of times what we project can become someone else's perception of you and therefore can become their reality. Maybe a classic situation of this is when you're being off task or you're being goofy and silly, teachers or other people can perceive that maybe you are a goofball or maybe you are the class clown, and then that becomes their reality of the situation or of you, and then that's how we form reputations. So we always got to think about the energy that we're projecting out there, the body language that we're putting out there, and sometimes this can be unfair because sometimes we project things that aren't really reality, and then it comes back to bite us in the butt. All right, this week's quote of the week is, most disagreements are caused by different perceptions that created different realities. And if there's one thing that I hope you guys learned from this Bob lesson today, it is that we are all unique individuals and we all have unique perceptions of reality and perceptions of different situations, different perceptions of just everything. And if there's one thing I would hope you would take away, it's having that awareness, and also having the awareness that we need to look at life through our own lens and make our own decisions, but also acknowledge that other people are going to look at life through their own lens, and a lot of times nobody has to be right. You're not right, they're not right. You each have your own perception. Find middle ground, find compromise. All right, let's give away some jelly beans. This week's Jelly Bean Question of the Week winners: Ashton Jellison, Nolan Drake, Abigail Kramer, Danielle Klein, Elise Roberts. All 6th graders. Where are the 7th and 8th graders at? The answer to last week's Jelly Bean Question of the Week was a river. All right, this week's Jelly Bean Question of the Week. What is the only word in the dictionary that's spelled incorrectly? I know a lot of you don't go looking through the dictionary questioning whether words are spelt correctly or not, so this one might be a little harder, I'm thinking. If you think you know, get your answer into the Bob box. Turn it in by the end of the week. Tune in next week to see if you're a winner. All right, let's make it a great week at the Helena Middle School.